Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Los Angeles County Office of Education. My name is Art Delgado, and I am the Superintendent of the Los Angeles County Office of Education. And on behalf of the Los Angeles County Office of Education, it is our honor and pleasure to co-host the Candidates Forum for the Office of the California Superintendent of Public Instruction. I'm glad to see a great turnout, and we have with us this evening an assembly of strong advocates for educational excellence. Thank you all for joining us. I also want to give a great thank you to our candidates, Superintendent Tom Torlakson and Mr. Marshall Tuck. Welcome for giving us an opportunity to learn more about your vision for educational leadership in California. Your insights into the various challenges our education communities are facing and how you view the role of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. Thank you as well to our co-host, the Los Angeles County School Trustees Association. And I'd also like to acknowledge our partners and co-sponsors of this forum, the League of Women Voters of California Education Fund and the California State PTA. Our panel members who represent these organizations will be introduced by our moderator later in this program. Now, this forum is intended to provide our education communities an opportunity to get to know the candidates and where they stand on critical issues facing public education. Providing this kind of leadership and advocacy on key educational issues is very much in keeping with the many vital functions of the County Office of Education. These functions also include educating our county's most vulnerable students and providing fiscal oversight and a wide range of additional support services to our county's 80 school districts. We do this in concert with our partners, school board members from the Los Angeles County Trustees Association, and many of you, I'm sure, have pressing questions for our candidates, and like you, I'm intensely interested in hearing a lively exchange of ideas here this evening, and I'll be jotting down notes just like all of you will be tonight. The challenges facing California education are formidable. And I think we are fortunate to have our two candidates here tonight to share their thoughts on these challenges with us in this place, in this room, and as well as with those that will be with us as part of our TV audience through the California channel. So now let me turn this over to our moderator, Janis Hirohama, and past president of the League of Women Voters of California Education Fund.
Hello, and I'm very pleased to serve as the moderator for this candidates forum for the Office of California Superintendent of Public Instruction. Superintendent of Public Instruction is a nonpartisan, statewide constitutional office. Superintendent is responsible for the day-to-day operations of the California Department of Education, CDE, which oversees the public school system and administers and enforces state education laws. Superintendent's job is to implement decisions of the legislature and the State Board of Education. In a very real sense, then, superintendent is responsible for the education of more than 7 million children and young adults in more than 9,000 schools across the state. As noted by Dr. Delgado, today's forum is hosted by the Los Angeles County Office of Education and the Los Angeles County School Trustees Association, in co-sponsorship with the League of Women Voters of California Education Fund and the California State PTA. We are being cablecast live by the California Channel and streamed live on the California Channel website, calchannel.com. This is a nonpartisan educational candidates forum. None of the hosting or co-sponsoring organizations endorse, support, or oppose any candidate for public office. Today, you'll be hearing from the two candidates who will appear on the ballot for Superintendent of Public Instruction in the November general election. Both candidates have agreed to the ground rules for this forum. I would now like to introduce the candidates to you. The candidates you will hear from today are Tom Torlakson, California Schools Superintendent, and Marshall Tuck. If you could please hold your applause. And Marshall Tuck, Educator, Schools Executive. The questions that will be asked of our candidates this evening come from three sources: those submitted prior to the forum by members of the co-sponsoring organizations, those submitted by our live audience, and those submitted by home viewers via email. For those of you watching the program live, you can email questions to forum@lacoe.edu. Questions are reviewed by representatives of the co-sponsoring organizations to make sure they are relevant, are not duplicative, and follow the agreed-upon guidelines and ground rules. Questions focus on the issues. Personal or individually targeted questions or attacks on any candidate are not used or considered. Let me explain the format. Format for the forum will be as follows. Each candidate will give a 90-second opening statement. After the opening statements, there will be a first round of questions and answers. In that round, the first question will be asked by Superintendent Delgado and the second question by a student. The rest of round one will be devoted to questions submitted prior to the forum by members of the co-sponsoring organizations. All questions will be answered by both candidates. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer each question. The order of candidates will be rotated between the candidates. As a reminder to the candidates, timers will give you a 15-second warning before your time is up. When you see the stop sign, please finish your sentence and stop speaking. The second round of questions will be asked by a panel of representatives from the hosting and co-sponsoring organizations, and I would like to introduce that panel now. First, Dr. Arturo Delgado, Superintendent of Schools, representing the Los Angeles County Office of Education. Linda Wah, representing the Los Angeles County School Trustees Association. Marilyn Buchi, representing the League of Women Voters of California Education Fund, and Kathy Moffitt, representing the California State PTA. Again, both candidates will answer each question and will have 1 minute each to respond. In the third and final round of questioning, the candidates will answer questions that were written or emailed by the audience or submitted before the forum by members of sponsoring organizations. After all 3 rounds of questions and answers are completed, each candidate will have 2 minutes to comment, rebut, augment, or clarify any topic raised in the forum. They will speak in the reverse order of their opening statements. We ask you in the audience to please hold your applause until the end of the forum. That will keep the proceedings impartial and allow us to ask as many questions as possible. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the volunteers assisting with timing, question sorting, and other essential tasks. They are members of the League of Women Voters and the 33rd District PTA, working with the Los Angeles County Office of Education and the Los Angeles County School Trustees Association. So, we're ready to begin. The order of the first question was determined by random drawing, and the order will alternate throughout the forum. And we will start with Mr. Torlakson. You have 90 seconds for your opening statement.
Thank you, and great to be here. Thank you, Superintendent Delgado, the League, and the PTA. I'm a teacher. I'm a coach. I want to see that every single student thrives, has self-confidence, and can achieve their dreams. That's what I'm all about. It takes teamwork. We have a long way to go. We have a lot of work to do, but together, we're making real progress. For instance, we've raised graduation rates in California to an all-time high, 80%. The key to lasting improvements is to invest in our schools. Stopping the cuts means smaller classes, means stronger academics, means expanding career education, means bringing back art, music, and drama to our schools. We're also putting more decisions in the hands where they belong at the local level, at our school level, where teachers, parents, and community leaders can set priorities, not politicians in Washington or in Sacramento. And of course, it takes more than money. Students need to be safe. I've written laws to prevent bullying. I've written laws to create 4,000 after-school programs in the state of California. And we need great teaching in every school. I helped pass a law this year to make it easier to fire abusive or ineffective teachers. But I also believe experienced teachers deserve a fair hearing when their job is on the line. We're making real progress. This is not the time to take a step backwards, put that progress at risk. Our students get only one chance at a great education, working together to help our students achieve their dreams. Let's do that. Work together.
Thank you. Now the opening statement for Mr. Tuck. You have 90 seconds.
I also want to thank our co-sponsors. I want to recognize the students. The high school students are here with us tonight. Appreciate you guys coming and taking your time. I left my job in the technology sector about 12 years ago to get an education full-time, because I believe there's nothing more important to giving kids a better life than giving them a quality education. I helped create Green Dot Public Schools. We opened charter high schools in the highest need areas of LA. And our students are graduating college ready at 4 times the rate of neighboring schools. I then went to work for former LA Mayor Villaraigosa. We took over the lowest performing schools in Los Angeles. Great kids, but failing schools. And I'm proud to say our kids, after 5 years, had the highest improvement of any school system in the state of California with more than 10,000 students. But doing this work day after day, I became convinced that we will never educate all kids in our state until we change the status quo in Sacramento. We are the wealthiest state in the nation, and our schools rank 45th in math and reading. And 20 years ago, we were 44th. We need to do better for our kids, and we got to make changes now. And if you look most recently at what's wrong in Sacramento, it starts, you can see it clearly in the Vergara case. 9 students had to file a lawsuit against the state superintendent and against the state to get rights to a quality education. And a judge said the laws around 2-year tenure and seniority-based layoffs and dismissal process, they shocked the conscience in terms of the impact on high-poverty kids. And yet the state superintendent and the state is appealing that case. We need to change now. It does not make sense for kids. We have to put kids first, and that's why every major newspaper in this state has endorsed our campaign.
Thank you. If the audience could please hold their applause until the end of the forum, that will help us move along. We're now ready to move into round 1, and the first question will be asked by Superintendent Delgado.
Thank you. Here's the first question. At the state level, we have the State Board of Education, we have the California Department of Education, the Superintendent of Public Instruction, and the Governor. If decisions are to be made at the local level, how do you include frontline educators who want their voices heard in this process?
And we will start with Mr. Torlakson. You have 1 minute.
Well, frontline teachers need to be involved. That is absolutely for sure. We have a process for doing that now, and another process I initiated to create a collaborative. We have frontline educators, administrators, and teachers going to be sitting down with my department and looking together and with teachers at how we can help prioritize the solutions for our schools. So this is one way. The local control funding formula, which I strongly supported and the governor championed, is a major new day in education. It allows for teachers to be involved and educators to be involved at the local level, setting priorities. Again, not by Washington, not by Sacramento, but by that authority residing at the local level. So we're in a new day moving in the right direction in that regard.
Thank you. Mr. Tuck, 1 minute.
Sacramento needs to start by making every single decision based on one very clear thing: what is best for kids. And right now, there are way too many decisions being made in Sacramento by politicians and not being made by teachers and principals and parents in local school communities at their schools. And that's what needs to happen. In the schools that I led, we pushed as much responsibility as possible to those that work in the schools. Right now, our state, we have a 2,300-page book called the California Education Code. It is the visual definition of bureaucracy, and it's the counter of truly empowering educators to do their job. We need to truly give real empowerment to local school communities. You can see it over and over again. You can see it in the Vergara ruling where the state ruled instead of supporting educators. You can see it in terms of the state now saying there is a cap on local district reserves and not letting school districts locally make those decisions. These are decisions that the state superintendent and the state over and over and over again is not truly giving local control and isn't prioritizing kids.
Thank you. The second question will be asked by Christen Thompson, a student from Bellflower High School. Christen, could you please come forward to pose your question?
Do you think any student, no matter their grade or GPA, should be admitted into an AP class? Do you think this is setting them up for failure if their past performances have indicated they may not perform well?
And we will start with Mr. Tuck.
First, thank you again for coming out and taking your time to ask this question. I think student voice in our schools is essential to having a great school in our state. The question was around AP classes. I believe that every single child needs to have access to AP classes at the high school level. I also believe that we need to bring fundamental changes to our schools to ensure that we're preparing our kids to be successful in those AP classes. What I saw in the schools that we led is we had additional time for our kids who are behind in reading, who are behind in math in the early years in their school so they could actually catch up, and then we truly gave them those opportunities to have access to those core courses and to AP courses that we know all kids have access to, and we need to make sure it's all kids access in all communities. So I absolutely believe that kids need to have access to those courses, and I think the state has a responsibility to make sure they're supporting local schools, supporting local school decision making, so we are preparing our children to be successful in those classes and not send up for failure. But first and foremost, Kids First says give access to all kids in those areas.
Thank you. Mr. Torlakson.
And I would agree, and I thank you again for coming forward with your question. We want to provide that access for all students. We want all of our students to be college and career ready. And one of the major reforms I've helped champion and help implement is the local control funding formula, where we're putting billions of dollars in the communities where the kids have the greatest needs, where the students have the greatest opportunities to advance. And so English learners, kids in poverty, we want to make sure that their schools provide those opportunities. And that we early on, just starting from the very beginning, early learning before kindergarten and on through, support our students so they can be proficient in the English language, so they can be competent and confident and move forward and take those AP courses. California is making strides in having those courses more accessible and in having more students take them. We want to see it much more ubiquitous around the state of California. I support your goals.
Thank you. We will now ask a series of questions submitted in advance of today's forum by members of the co-sponsoring organizations. To start off, we have 2 questions asking about the role of Superintendent of Public Instruction if elected. So the first question: although the Superintendent of Public Instruction is public education's only statewide constitutional officer in California, too many voters don't know what the position is or what it does. Please let our audience know what you see as your most important responsibility if elected to serve in that office for the next 4 years. A reminder, each of you has 1 minute to answer, and we'll start with Mr. Torlakson.
Well, we need to continue to invest in our schools. When I took over 4 years ago, our finances in our education system were in a shambles. Schools were laying off tens of thousands of teachers. We saw very important programs dismantled or curtailed. And so my goal was to right the finances in the state of California and return to investing in the future. That was my key and top priority, and we went from 188 school districts that were in severe financial trouble down to only a handful of those. And so we got the public's attention to what was happening, what was harmful, and said, let's invest in our schools, and then we'll have lower class sizes, stronger academics, more opportunities for career education. And we've been able to invest that. I am excited about where we're going in the new 21st century skills. I helped get $1 billion to help implement that, get the computers and bandwidth into our schools, get the professional development. It's an exciting time of real change and reform that's opening opportunities to students as never before in California history.
Thank you. Mr. Tuck.
The state superintendent's top responsibility is to be an independent leader for kids and for parents, and make sure that when there are policy decisions being made in Sacramento, that we are leading with a clear vision around what makes the most sense for kids, what makes the most sense for parents, and how do we enable teachers and principals to make the key decisions locally in their school communities. And that is not happening right now. It is not happening right now. When you have a lawsuit where students are filing suit against the state superintendent and against the state, and the state is fighting those students, that is not leading on behalf of kids, and that is happening in our state way too often. And we need fundamental change. So I believe that leadership starts with setting a real vision for what's possible for California kids. And that vision is we can be better than 45th. We got to get right back to the top, and it's possible. And you fight every single day to do whatever you can, both in your power and outside your power, to drive the changes that Californians know that our kids deserve and need to have happen. And that, to me, is the role of the state superintendent. Every single decision, kid first, kid focused.
Thank you. A follow-up question. With the state budget determined by the governor and the legislature, and policy determined by the State Board of Education, what can you do to improve public education in California? Where can you have the strongest influence? Mr. Tuck.
State superintendent can do a lot. First and foremost, we talked about it before, but let's talk about what's possible legally. There was a lawsuit that sued the state superintendent, the Vergara suit. If I'm state superintendent, the first day in office, I'm actually changing sides and I'm siding with the kids right away, and you can do that legally and change the tide of things. Secondly is, we got to give more schools more local control and more flexibility. The State Board of Education can provide a large number of waivers to that burdensome ed code, and it's the state superintendent's responsibility and priority to push those waivers forward. So I believe working with county superintendents and with district superintendents, we can move forward and get a lot more flexibility to our local schools right away so that teachers and principals and parents are making the key decisions in their local communities. The state superintendent can be the one and should be the one leading on the policy with the legislature rather than reacting to the legislature. Working with parents, working with superintendents and teachers to say what policy makes the most sense for our schools rather than right now playing defense and letting politicians kind of political dynamics drive what's happening policy-wise.
Thank you. Mr. Torlakson.
Well, I'm a teacher and I'm a superintendent. And my goal when I wake up every day is to improve the schools in California to the benefit of all of the students in the great state of California. And I have a track record of performance, of bridge building, of bringing people together, of building teams. Right now we have a great team. The governor prioritizes education. The State Board of Education prioritizes education. I prioritize education. And guess what? We're working together and the results are better than ever before. Our parent involvement is historic in the level of parent engagement and involvement. And more needs to be done. No doubt about it. We have a lot of work to do, but we're heading in the right direction. The reforms on 21st century skills, career education, bringing technology into our schools. These are things where we work as a team. In the legislature, I led the effort to get $1.25 billion to invest in bandwidth and computers and in the professional development so our teachers can teach the new 21st century skills. That's just one example. $500 million I was able to obtain for career pathways involving students in real-world experience with businesses who are partners, mentors, providing internships and exciting learning opportunities.
Thank you. Next question. Enrollment in teacher preparation programs is at its lowest level in years. These programs are not drawing the best and the brightest. Yet many of the policy signals to potential teachers are likely to be perceived as negative. Pensions have been reduced. Numerous proposals have been floated to base personnel decisions and compensation on test scores. The courts are looking at making it easier to fire teachers and to extend the length of their probationary employment period. Are these policies negative signals to prospective teachers? Why or why not? Beginning with Mr. Torlakson.
Well, this is indeed a challenge because it's dropped off from maybe 50,000 teacher candidates a year down to about 25,000. And this is a tragedy, and it's partly due to the chaos of the 5 years of the recession, but we need a more welcoming environment. We need a more encouraging environment. And so we do need to recruit and train the best and the brightest, and we need to give them a world-class training program and give them hands-on experience, real classroom experience as they get ready to go on to their probationary period as teachers. We need to support teachers through the arc of their career. I have supported legislation that will provide low-interest loans to have those students come and be part of our education team to help teach in the harder-to-teach areas or higher-risk areas for students that need additional help. So we have a comprehensive plan to encourage more students to become those teachers. There's a plan called a cadet program like we have for firefighters and police for teacher cadets. I would like to implement that in California and have more of our young people see their future as coming back to their neighborhood and being the outstanding, inspiring teacher that those students need in those neighborhoods across the state.
Thank you. Mr. Tuck.
As somebody who's been running schools for the last 12 years in some of our toughest neighborhoods, there's just no question the most important thing a school can do is have a loving, caring, excited teacher in front of those kids. And I've seen teachers like Trebor Jaquez and Will Heisler who literally have been teaching kids for years, and they have dozens of students who will say, those teachers changed my life. So there's nothing more important in our school system than attracting, exciting, and keeping high-quality people to come into teaching. And we're just not doing that right now as a state, and our state's not leading on this. We have a lot of big things to take on. We have to find a way to think about teacher compensation differently and more. Because right now as a teacher, you can't teach in LA and live in LA, and that is a real problem. You look at the policies. I think right now policies like seniority-based layoffs actually are a disincentive for people that want to go into teaching, because who wants to take a job where you can be great at your job and get laid off 5 years later, irrespective of your actual performance? And I believe the state superintendent and every member of this legislature and the governor need to be on a regular basis on college campuses, talking to kids, getting them excited to come into what is the most beautiful profession you can find out there.
Thank you. We have a related question as a follow-up. How should the state go about recruiting and retaining talented professionals to staff our classrooms? Mr. Tuck.
I think I mentioned a couple of them. I think if you look, I believe that the most important, form of service to country is military, but right behind it is teaching. And I think we should have every single politician and every single leader out there on a regular basis talking on college campuses, talking to young people about how to get them excited to come into this profession. We have to get serious at the state level in our budget so we can provide more dollars for teacher compensation. And that means we get serious about maybe decreasing dollars for things like incarceration where we're overspending as a state. And I think we have to change the ed code and the policies. Right now, you're so constrained as a teacher by Sacramento telling you what to do and how to do it through our ed code that who wants to go in a job where you're not able to truly be creative and exciting, and that those are the kind of things that don't attract our young people to come in. And in terms of retention, we need high quality work conditions for teachers, which means let's give them more time for collaboration. Teachers need time to work with each other to get better. They'll feel good about their jobs. When they feel good about their jobs, they are supporting and educating kids, and kids soar.
Thank you. Mr. Torlakson.
Well, investing in education has to be our top priority, and it has been my priority. And we've seen a major turnaround. We're seeing programs being rebuilt. Again, career education expanded, science education expanded. And we find out as we survey teachers that they want the resources, they want the tools to be the teachers they know they can be and to inspire the children in their classrooms. So this is a key part of where we're going, to invest again and take a stand and go out and get the resources. And I've done this, and we've again turned things around in districts across the state of California.
Thank you. We're now ready to move on to round two, in which questions will be asked by a panel of representatives of the hosting and co-sponsoring organizations. Again, each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to each question. And we'll start with Arturo Delgado, Superintendent of Schools, representing the LA County Office of Education.
Thank you. In California, a group of 10 school districts formed their own coalition called CORE to apply for Race to the Top funds, separate from that of the state of California. Is this an alternative that should be pursued by other districts? Why or why not?
And we'll start with Mr. Torlakson.
I think that's a decision, again, that must be made locally by the elected school board and by the parents and leaders of that community. I support it, even though some were opposed to having the CORE form. I supported it because I thought it would be better for students. If the superintendents in those districts and school boards felt that a new organization that they put together could improve the outcomes for students, I was for that. But I think it has to be entered very carefully, and that I think teachers, as part of the team, need to be brought into the decision-making about how the partnership would work and how their role would be emphasized and identified.
Thank you. Mr. Tuck.
As I mentioned earlier, the more flexibility we can give to teachers and principals and parents locally, the better off for kids. And our state is one of a very few number of states in the country that did not get flexibility from No Child Left Behind from the federal government. Flexibility that we know superintendents want, that we know educators want, that's helpful to our kids. Gives us more flexibility to use money on programs that make sense for kids, more flexibility from the rules. And we chose, the current state superintendent and the state chose not to apply for those waivers. And because of that, school districts on their own went and applied for that. So as state superintendent, one of the first things I will do is move forward to work with all of the districts and say, let's actually get waiver from No Child Left Behind for all of the state, not just for 7 school districts like we have it currently right now. And I think this is, again, a situation where we could get more flexibility from the federal government. We could actually give school districts locally more control, but we are choosing not to as a state, and that's a decision that's being made by the state superintendent and by the Sacramento establishment, and it's not a good one for kids.
Thank you. Now we have a question from Linda Wah, representing the Los Angeles County School Trustees.
Thank you. For many students, student success will require a seamless transition between various educational agencies to smoothly transition students from high school to college. What is your vision for creating that seamless transition, and what are the obstacles that need to be removed?
We'll start with Mr. Tuck, 1 minute.
The work we did in the partnership schools, and both at Green Dot, where I've led a number of high schools and middle schools and elementary schools, we did a couple of things. So one is we invested heavily at the high school level in terms of additional counseling support and additional support to really think about more time for that transition to go into the university. We work very closely with university partners in order to ensure that our students actually were prepared. One, had access to those universities, and two, actually were prepared. Three, we leveraged a lot of community organizations. Just saw a lot of success from community groups that had pathways to college, pathways to career programs that we actually brought onto campuses like Santee High School and like Mendez Learning Center that was just instrumental for our kids. And the end result was we increased our graduation rates by 60%. We dramatically increased the number of young people actually going to college, and bringing these practices at scale across the state. We're identifying what's working really well in schools like ours and making sure other districts are doing that and helping to facilitate university and K-12 interaction, to me, is something that I've just seen to succeed and work for kids.
Thank you. Mr. Torlakson.
Well, it certainly does need to be connected and worked at a more focused level. And pleased to say that $250 million was given to me and my department to set up a system of grants to encourage just that. And we just kicked off High Tech LA, fantastic program where hundreds of businesses are involved, and we're getting coursework from high school to community college onto the university. Another example of this kind of approach that we put grants out across the state to encourage, Hartnell Community College works with the high schools in Monterey County on an engineering or computer science and coding. And those students start as freshmen with an articulated set of coursework. They go through, they graduate, they dual enroll in the community college. So when they graduate with a high school diploma, they have an AA in computer sciences. And then they go on and they can finish and get a BS degree in 3 years or 3.5 years, not 4 years or 5 years. And that's an example of very pure articulation. Another case is in Sierra College, and another case will wait. Thank you.
Thank you for respecting our time limits. Now we'll hear from Marilyn Buchi, representing the League of Women Voters of California Education Fund.
Education reform has long been a major point of discussion and debate, yet there is no real agreement on what the most needed and effective reforms are or should be. Over the past couple of years, California schools have experienced major changes with the adoption of the local control funding formula and new accountability requirements, beginning implementation of the Common Core state standards, a new testing system, expansion of charter schools, and a recent court ruling on teacher tenure and related matters. The question: is it fair to say that we have before us this evening a choice between two change agents with different ideas of what changes need to be made? Yes or no? Why or why not? Please elaborate.
And we'll start with Mr. Torlakson.
So the question again is, if you could just, it was a little bit long, but
No, I knew this was going to be a hard one.
Yeah.
It's so long. The question: is it fair to say that we have before us
we have
this
an
evening
incredible
a choice between two change
Yes.
agents with
Yes.
different ideas and what changes?
Well, we are in the midst of historic, positive transformation of our education system. Truly, this is historic in its magnitude. And I am a reformer in saying, let's make sure we can seize these opportunities in the clearest way possible and coordinate and have the state and the state superintendent facilitate that change. There are some things where we would agree, my opponent and I, and things where we disagree. For instance, on the issue of the length of time before a teacher becomes permanent in their status. But I believe we have dynamic time going forward, and I'm excited about the change. I've been leading that change, and the accountability that's coming with it is new and refreshing. Again, parents working with school board members, with business leaders. It's a new day in California education. And I'm proud of the work we're doing together, the collaboration at all levels to make this happen for our students, for their success.
Thank you. Mr. Tuck.
There's no question that we need fundamental change in our schools. There's no question that I'm a change agent. You look at the work that I've done over the last 12 years in LA and beyond. It's about how do we truly transform our schools so every child gets a quality education. I don't think the state, in terms of how the state operates and the status quo, is changing. I think the Vergara lawsuit is the clearest example of that, where right away, after a judge literally said that the evidence shocks the conscience in this lawsuit, the entire Sacramento education establishment said, we're against it. We appealed the case. The state superintendent appealed, and almost every single member of the state legislature and the state establishment has either been quiet or is fighting against it. So that tells you that it still is business as usual in our state, that we are not making the fundamental changes, that we are not changing first and foremost the most important question, which is every single decision based on kids, not based on insiders, not based on interest, based on kids. And that's what has to change. That hasn't changed. That's why we've been stuck. 45 today, 44 20 years ago. We need fundamental change now, and that's what this campaign's all about.
Thank you. And now Kathy Moffett, California State PTA.
Thank you. As you know, PTA is all about parent involvement. Recognizing that parent involvement is a key factor in student success, the state of California has made parent involvement one of the 8 priorities required of local districts as part of their local control and accountability plan process. What can you do as state superintendent to support school districts in their efforts to effectively engage their many parent communities?
Mr. Tuck.
I think parent involvement starts with, are we really giving parents power and rights to be true partners and true advocates in our schools? And there is a Parent Empowerment Act, which gives parents true ability to turn schools over when they are failing. I have been a strong supporter out of the gates. It's a bill that the current state superintendent actually voted against when he was in the legislature. And I think it's clear to show, I believe, real parent power. Secondly, if you look at my work, we took over the lowest performing schools in LA. The first thing we did was we created a school report card to give parents the information that they needed to see how was their school actually doing. Simple, user-friendly, accessible to parents. So we put the power in the hands of parents. And then lastly, we invested to engage parents. We launched a parent college on Saturdays in Watts, in East LA, Saturdays, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Parents come into school to learn how to be partners in this work. And I think the state superintendent's job is, let's find the schools that are doing great work on parent engagement, and let's share those practices and make sure every single school is prioritizing parents, and let's make policy that gives parents real power to be partners in this work.
Thank you. Mr. Torlakson.
Well, I was pleased recently, the State Board of Education, to have about 150 school administrators, school board members, and community advocates come and say that we were on the right path in getting parents engaged. And we need to do more of it, of course. I have proposed getting the best practices. We worked with PK, PICO, Urban League Los Angeles. We worked with Californians Together. We worked with PTA. And there were genuine and very effective outreach efforts made. And also understanding the differences of our parents. Some parents are getting up early to catch a bus at 5 or 5:30 in the morning. They don't get back in time to go to an evening meeting during the week. And so providing Saturday schools, providing interpreters at meetings for non-English speaking parents, providing daycare or childcare for those parents so they can come and really be part of the discussion in a genuine way. There were a few districts that had token approaches and didn't genuinely involve their parents. And we want to show those districts there's a better way, a right way. And again, the new state law, local control, really says, underscore the involvement and participation of parents. It's better for kids.
Thank you. We're now ready for our second round of panelist questions, starting with Dr. Delgado.
We've heard a lot tonight, a great deal about local control, church change agents and parent power and the like. However, the greatest changes that we've seen locally in our school districts have, such as Common Core and the LCFF, LCAP, seem to all be coming from Sacramento. And so the question is, how do you propose to balance the intent of local control with the decisions that have to be made or should be made by those administering the changes in the local districts, superintendents, boards of education, parent associations? How do you propose to balance that with the decisions being made in the state?
Start with Mr. Torlakson.
Well, again, I think the major decisions, historic, and I think trend-setting nationwide in terms of what we've done in California, point in that direction of really moving power to the local level. I'll give one example. My opponent talks about the education code. We have taken a direct look at the education code and said, let's eliminate some of the red tape. We had 39 separate programs that tied up $13 billion in spending that were in the ed code. We cut the red tape and allowed local districts to make the decisions on how you would prioritize and spend your share of the $39 million. And so, again, this is a lot of communication needed, but power shifting to the local school boards. I see this as a very, very positive trend. The collaborative I mentioned, the legislature put out $10 million at our request, my request, for creating a collaborative between school administrators, teachers, frontline school board members to talk about how we can help each other. Best practices that we have in one jurisdiction can be moved over to another school district. Let's work together.
Thank you. Mr. Tuck.
I think it really comes down to we have to really change business as usual in Sacramento because there is a natural tendency to try to keep control and tell local school districts what to do and how to do it. And when I think about local control, I think about more local control over funding, over staffing, over curriculum, over your school structure and your school day and time. You know, thinking about how do we actually give traditional public schools more of the local control that by definition charter schools actually have today in schools. That's local control. And let's take a specific example. We hear a lot about local control recently. And then a couple weeks ago, legislation gets moved forward that's going to cap the amount of money that a school district can put on reserve. The state is telling superintendents and school committees how much money they can hold in reserve, even though we know during the recession, the school districts that did the best job during the recession were ones that actually had higher reserves because they were able to keep their teachers and not have to make as many layoffs. And yet Sacramento comes right in after making a lot of discussion around local control and right away takes that control away from school districts. So to me, it's not just about talking, it's taking real action.
Thank you. And now a question from Ms. Waugh.
The purpose of charter schools was to provide schools that were innovative or different from other public schools in some way. Today, some communities have voiced concern that California spends a significant amount of public funds on charter schools, yet there is little empirical evidence that the charter schools produce better results than other public schools. How should California handle charter schools in the future to ensure that they actually are models of innovation or provide something different than the other public schools?
Start with Mr. Tuck.
You know, I have unique experience here because I was the president of Greendale Public Schools, which was a number of charter schools, and then I actually led the Partnership for LA Schools, which is traditional public schools. So I've operated both in a charter school environment and a traditional public school environment. And there's no question, I believe, that charter schools have been beneficial to kids and to parents because for the first time, it really gave parents who had the least real choice and opportunity to make decisions for their kids in their schools. I also believe that you'll see some just incredibly innovative school models because they have a lot more flexibility from the education code than traditional public schools. And I believe that we got to give that same flexibility to teachers and principals in our traditional public schools. I do think that we have to do a couple things better with charter schools. If charter schools aren't performing well, they do need to be shut down, because the whole point was more flexibility for more accountability. We have to invest a lot more in having real, true, genuine collaboration between traditional public schools and charter schools, so when there are really fun, exciting, enriching practices that are helping kids, that those are being learned from charter school to traditional district and also from traditional district to charter school. So I'm a supporter. There's certainly some things that we got to work on to make sure we're focusing on kids and providing the best school for all kids.
Thank you. Mr. Torlakson.
Charter schools are a part of our education system. There are good charter schools, there are excellent charter schools, and there are those that aren't living up to their promises to the parents and to the students that they enrolled in those schools. Those charter schools that are subpar, that aren't performing, they should be shut down, as my opponent just said. We also need to look at how those schools may have innovated and found some good practices. And there are different varieties of charter schools. There's district-sponsored charter schools. I just visited one in Sacramento where because they have a flex schedule where the students go and work at a work site and have internships in various places, they went to have a charter to have a more flexible work schedule. And the teachers embraced it and the administration embraced it and the students are loving it. So we need to look at those best practices between our magnet schools, our neighborhood schools, and our charter schools. One of the things I did is initiate a forum at Loyola Marymount. We've had 2 forums on excellence in schools, and we looked at sharing the best practices in charter schools, the best practices in magnet schools, the best practices in our neighborhood schools, and seeing how we could scale them up so that other schools could take advantage of the insights that have been learned in those innovative programs.
Thank you. And now a question from Ms. Buchi.
Like Dr. Delgado, we have a question about the new school funding formula. As he noted, this new system, together with the LCAP, the Local Control Accountability Plan, has substantially decentralized decision-making in California from the state to the local school districts. My question is a little more specific. How would you recommend balancing the desire for local control over funding decisions with the state's presumption that new supplemental and concentration grants should be principally directed to meet the needs of foster youth low-income students, and English learners.
Start with Mr. Torlakson.
I believe that the governor, the legislature, and the State Board of Education have found a good balance. We're going to see over the next couple of years how the accountability plans prioritize funding and whether or not the school districts meet their accountability plan that they've forged in partnership with parents and community leaders. So I think we have struck a good balance in that regard. Again, it's a local control, new environment, but it's empowering. We don't need politicians from Sacramento or Washington, D.C. dictating one-size-fits-all solutions for our schools. We need to, rely, as the law says, on the local district's discretion, working with your voters, with your community to set priorities. I think that's in keeping with what you're asking on that question.
Thank you. Mr. Tuck.
I think one of the great things about local control funding is it's providing more resources to our neediest kids. As somebody who's worked at Figueroa Elementary School and Sunrise Elementary School, there's just no question that our students required more support than maybe my son Mason, who's got two parents who both went to college and are both working. So I think the distribution of dollars is the right decision to be done. I think that when we talk about the balance and the rollout of LCFF, I think we see again Sacramento, relying back on business as usual, which is an incredible investment in the LCAP, which is a plan up front to write what you're going to do with the money, but no additional transparency on the back end to actually truly say, with the additional dollars, how did schools spend that money, and how did school districts spend that money? So I believe strongly what we need to move to is every single school and school district has to be clear, very simple, user-friendly reports that parents can read. What additional dollars did they get from LCFF? What did they spend that money on? So we can build confidence amongst the taxpayers, and also so we can identify which programs actually worked for kids to learn from this valuable piece of policy.
Thank you. And now a question from Ms. Moffett.
Thank you. There is widespread agreement and adopted learning standards affirming the role of the arts in a well-rounded education. In these days of local control, what steps can you take as superintendent of schools to ensure that students across the state have equitable access to the arts in their education?
Start with Mr. Tuck.
Yeah, I think one thing, we talked a lot about flexibility and local control, and you still actually have a lot of constraints, even with local control funding, around really how do you most effectively provide kids a real robust curriculum, including the arts in our schools. So an example of that is there's a school I was at recently, Gabriella Charter School, where they have it's an elementary school, every single child takes dance every single day. And they have an extended school day. And the reason they're able to do that is they have a lot more flexibility from the Ed Code around how they think about their staffing and how they think about their school day and their school time. And thus you are seeing kids who are getting high quality curriculum, that includes art, that includes the core subjects, and that's very possible. And so I think what the state superintendent has to be pushing for is, how do we give traditional public schools as much flexibility as possible to be really creative with their programs so kids can have the arts and computer science and language at a young age and math, science, social science, the core courses that we knew all kids absolutely need. And we got to push for that flexibility, as well as when there are schools that are finding that magic and providing kids true, robust artistic opportunities, that we're sharing that and learning from that so it can happen in all schools across the state.
Thank you. Mr. Torlakson.
Well, the question's right to underscore the importance of the arts, and we know that this is a great way to engage students. We know that the various types of arts, whether it's music or drama or graphic arts, are, again, critically important for students to express themselves and be creative. And you can learn music and math as you work together. It's another language. So we have I have initiated a Create California working group task force that is moving to create a report looking at the best examples of how to integrate the arts into the curriculum of the schools of California. The new 21st century learning skills say we need to relate math and science and the arts and civics together. And so this is a part of where we're headed. I think we need to provide the best practices, help districts see the value of integrating these courses together and bringing the arts back in a vibrant way. We need that. It helps attach kids to school, gets them excited to come to school. This is a big part of a comprehensive education that we need to have throughout the state of California.
Thank you. And now we're moving on to our third and final round of questions, which come from written audience questions, emailed questions, and pre-submitted questions. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to each question. And we'll start with the first question. This question focuses on the issue of college and career readiness. The state is committed to producing graduates who are both college and career ready. In these days of local control and focus on academics and college readiness, what will be your role as state superintendent in making sure that the career ready aspect is not forgotten? Start with Mr. Torlakson.
Well, again, extremely pleased to report that our first round of grants, $250 million, we gave $15 million to the Pasadena, Los Angeles area, another $15 million to the Long Beach and Long Beach School District and Community College area. We're seeing career education coming alive, coming true. It's really working. And so that is a trend that we need to continue. These partnership academies, these deep involvements with business, the connection to the real world. We've had such success at the legislature at my request and the leadership of Senator Darrell Steinberg gave another $250 million to my department. Career ready is very, very important. College ready is very, very important. And you can blend the two together and it works. I was going to mention Guadati High School on the Sierra campus in Northern California. Students there are on a campus where they're taking community college courses and taking high school courses. One young lady graduated with an AA, 2 AAs in medical assistance and science along with her high school diploma, and is moving right into the career world.
Thank you. Mr. Tuck.
The starting point for both college and career readiness is ensuring that all of our children have access to a high-quality teacher at the elementary and middle school level. All of our children have access to a robust curriculum. All of our children have access to schools with strong leadership. And that's what we did in our schools, both at the Partnership and Green Dot, is let's make sure we have, at the starting point, the core foundational skills across all subject areas for our kids to get better at. And then step two is, how do we integrate both middle and high school level real career programs into our actual schools? We actually expanded the number of robotics classes. We actually did a program where we partnered with solar installation. You're actually finding high-quality companies that have high-quality desires and needs for kids. We actually had a number of companies that actually adopted our schools and provided internships over the summer. And these are the kind of things that we can do at scale. And I think the state superintendent's job to do is bring the business community together and say, what are the most important jobs in the next 20 years, and what are the skills that you specifically need for those jobs? And then actually, how do we redesign particular high school curriculums to truly integrate those deeply into our schools, what we did at a more micro level across the schools I've led.
Thank you. The next question. We've received a number of questions, as you might imagine, related to the recent California Superior Court judge's ruling that the state teacher tenure system discriminates against students from low-income families. This ruling, in the case known as Vergara versus California, has the potential to overturn a number of state laws governing various aspects of teacher tenure. Do you agree with the decision? Do you support an appeal of the decision? Or do you support settling it and calling the legislature into special session to rewrite these laws? And we'll start with Mr. Tuck.
I strongly agree with the judge's decision. I strongly side with the students in the case, and I think we need to get moving right now as a state on putting forward the solution and not waiting for this to wind through the courts. The partnership, we took over Markham Middle School in 2008. 8 months later, half of our teachers got layoff notices in 2009. This was the lowest performing middle school in all of LA, the neediest kids, and half of their teachers got layoff notices because of the seniority-based layoffs in our state ed code. We called the state, said, hey, what can we do about this? They said nothing. It's in the ed code. It was highly problematic to our children. I had campuses where we had literally a couple of teachers who physically pushed around kids. We could not remove them from the classroom or from their jobs. This is not a theoretical for me. I have seen incredible kids who are losing their futures because of these laws. They're not the only factor, but they are a factor, and we can change that factor right now. We side with the judge. He was very clear. These don't make sense for kids. I've lived in our schools. Let's move on and really, truly start making a solution that makes sense for kids.
Thank you. Mr. Torlakson.
We have a fundamental disagreement. I'm for kids. I'm for low-income kids. I've been a fighter. It's been my whole career for those kids and their future. I did say we should appeal that decision because I think it's fundamentally flawed. It's wrong on the facts. It's wrong on the law. The governor and the State Board of Education agreed. We've asked the Attorney General to file an appeal and bring it to a higher court level. I believe job protections, giving teachers a chance to have a hearing, they're on a proposed layoff list, to have them have a chance for a fair hearing. Having experienced teachers do that. Teaching is a tough job. Not everybody is cut out for that work. I know that. And what we are looking at is how do we move teachers who can't make it out of the profession faster? And I helped with a law this year that was signed in by Governor Brown that will expedite the process of removing abusive teachers and ineffective teachers from our schools. Again, it's a tough job, but we should allow teachers to move forward and get rid of the ones who can't make it, and then
Thank you.
the others have a chance through, we're being cut off. Okay.
Thank
good.
you.
Thank
Your
you.
time's up. The next question. 2 years ago tomorrow, Inglewood's elected school board members received a letter telling them that the state was taking over the school district. Since then, the California Department of Education has been in charge. The Fiscal Crisis and Management Assistant Team, FICMAT, has recently reported that the school district is struggling with leadership and fiscal management, and student achievement has declined. Parents say they've lost confidence in the ability of the state administrator to improve the quality of education. What will the Department of Education, under your leadership, do to regain the confidence of the Inglewood unified community? Mr. Torlakson.
Well, thank you. And school takeovers, school district takeovers are very rough situations. And just want to put it in context that we had a crisis 3.5 years ago where we were seeing school districts, 188 of them, in deep financial trouble. Only one went into state receivership. And I've worked diligently to put a management staff in place that'll turn it around. We're turning around the budget situation, and we are turning around the academics. It's going to take time. A district that's that deep in trouble and had so many fiscal problems and so many management problems needs to be turned around. I've had experience through the Quality Education Improvement Act of seeing hundreds of schools turned around with a model that we're bringing in to the Inglewood School District. It's going to take time, but I'm confident we're moving in the right direction and we'll solve the problems in Inglewood.
Thank you. Mr. Tuck.
The state superintendent and the state's takeover of Inglewood has not been successful, and it's been a problem for that community. There have been 3 different school administrators placed into that community in 2 years. An audit by the state just recently came out and said they are very concerned with the fiscal situation. They are very concerned with the leadership situation. There's not enough conversation with the community. This is, I worked in Inglewood. I started in Inglewood. It's a wonderful community with wonderful kids. And this district the state made the decision, the state superintendent made the decision to take this district over. And it is struggling and flailing right now, and that needs to change immediately. Step 1 for change is we got to be talking to the community all the time and really bringing hope and energy and belief back into what's possible, because Inglewood has great opportunity. We opened a high school in Inglewood in 2002 that was most recently on the U.S. News and World Report, one of the top high schools in the entire country. That's what Inglewood can do, but we need the right leadership that can really take Inglewood to the next level and get it done, and that's just not happening right now.
Okay, thank you. The next question. We've received a number of questions with the following concern about the structure of the local control funding formula. The so-called local control funding formula, as designed, disadvantages school districts having fewer than 55% of students who are foster students, English learners, or students of poverty. 2 districts, side by side, one with 49% and one with 55%, receive a difference of $5 million per year. Is this fair or equitable, or designed in such a way to benefit all students needing special support? Start with Mr. Tuck.
So as I mentioned earlier, I think that it is a good piece of policy for us to provide additional resources to those students with the greatest need. Our schools, we had an incredibly high rate of foster kids. We had a large number of homeless kids. We had almost 100% high poverty across our schools, large English learner population. They needed more resources, and there's no question about it. And when we provide more resources, they soar and they can make progress. So I believe it's a good piece of policy as it relates to that. I think our implementation, again, is kind of business as usual. We have done a lot of conversation around what do you plan to do with the money, but we're not bringing real transparency to the public about where is the money actually going. What was it spent on? The public actually agreed to raise taxes in the largest recession since the Great Depression, and we need to tell them where is their money going, and is it actually working for kids? So I want us to move towards, on the back end, real transparency of the dollars. Did it go to the highest need kids? Was it successful? And where it's successful, let's copy it, and where it's not, let's make changes fast.
Thank you. Mr. Torlakson.
I think my opponent is missing something, that the formula actually requires a spending plan to go with programs and looks at outcomes, looks at how the money was spent. And there are 58 superintendents of schools in the counties of the state that will oversee the implementation. And if a district's off course, they're going to be giving counseling and strict guidelines on how to get back on course to meeting the goals that they have set. The funding formula isn't perfect. And so one of the things that we're looking at is, are there places where there are inequities? Are there places where there need to be adjustments? This is an enormously huge reform. Again, trend-setting, historically enormous, the first of its kind in the nation. I recently met with 10 superintendents of the rural counties of California. They have some different needs than the urban centers of California. And we're looking with them at different ways that we can make the formula more just and adequate so that we could make sure that we're being fair to all students. But this is one of the major positive social and civil rights changes of our time to allow more money to go to these students of greater need.
Thank you. Our next question has several parts to it, so I will read it slowly. California's teacher evaluation law is more than 40 years old, and most observers believe it needs updating. 1, what do you believe is the primary purpose of a teacher evaluation system? 2, what standards or criteria should a teacher be evaluated against? And 3, who should decide what relative weights should be given to different criteria? We'll start with Mr. Torlakson.
Well, the evaluation system is very important. I was a teacher. I benefited from my principal coming and visiting my classes and giving me positive feedback, critique, how to improve my practice. We need multiple measures for helping our teachers improve their practice and find out the best teachers and how they're doing their job so well. So classroom observations, looking at student work, looking at test scores, these are all part of it. I do believe that the mix needs to be, the actual formula for evaluation needs to be worked out locally. Teachers should have a seat at the table. Parents and administrators can work out a plan at the local level that has ownership by everybody involved in that plan, and it works better. Take Long Beach, take ABC District, take Poway, take Central Unified in Fresno. In these districts, there's a partnership that helps us evaluate teachers and strengthen teachers, sharing best practices so that those teachers who aren't moving as fast as others in a particular improvement will get the benefit of those teachers who are. So I see it as a collaborative process and one that will yield good dividends for California.
Thank you. Mr. Tuck.
I think something was key in the question that you mentioned that I want to make sure people heard it. The teacher evaluation system hasn't changed for 40 years. Think about that for a second. We talked about, is this really about fundamental change? There's nothing more important than teachers. We need to have strong evaluation systems to help our teachers get better, and we haven't changed it for 40 years. I mean, everything in this world has changed in the last 40 years, and that gives you a sense of how broken things are in the status quo in Sacramento right now. We need to bring these changes. We need to have a teacher evaluation system that truly supports our teachers, feedback from principals, feedback from their fellow teachers, student achievement data, particularly growth on that, and over time at the high school level, feedback from students. And in our schools, we had a mix, what we call multiple measures, but we have to make the changes now. And the fact that no changes happen, and one of the most important things you can do to run schools in 40 years at the state level, that is the clearest sign of the challenges we have. We have politicians making decisions for kids in Sacramento versus getting educators up there who are going to push change that this state needs and our kids deserve.
Thank you. Moving on to our next question. Current research shows about 25% of public school students in California live at or below the poverty level, and these children are very unevenly divided across the state. Besides LCFF funding and LCAP requirements, what moves would you make as Superintendent of Public Instruction to work with other governmental and non-governmental agencies to support these students so they have a better chance at success? Mr. Tuck.
I can tell you what we've done. So, at Jordan High School in the heart of Watts, we helped create a mental health clinic on the campus so that we had, in addition to providing real supports for our kids in the classroom, they had additional social, emotional supports and health supports on the campus. We worked very closely with the city and worked with the gang youth reduction department because we had so many kids that had unfortunately, so many exposures to violence and to actually getting pulled into gangs. And so we actually brought in real experts from the city who were working on gang introduction, gang prevention on a regular basis, and brought them into our schools. We actually had several schools where they created offices on our campus, so they had real access to our kids on a regular basis. And that's something that I think at the state level we've got to do a much better job of is we really got to think about community schools. And I think the state's job is to find out where there are just wonderful things happening in terms of community schools and then really help make sure that is happening in all schools, particularly in our highest poverty neighborhoods, because if we can really solve all the challenges, kids rise up and they'll soar and they can get there.
Thank you. Mr. Torlakson.
Well, I've been a long advocate for schools as community centers and, again, getting out of the silos and connecting the services to help best our families succeed. And I've done that as a county supervisor and as a superintendent, encouraging more school-based clinics, more school-based parent centers, programs that will reach out to those parents and help those parents help their students succeed in school, help them with their homework. We have a number of programs that really work well, and we need to encourage local school districts to invest further in them. MESA, Math Engineering Achievement, that's a great program helping disadvantaged kids and low-income kids succeed. Puente, Avid, these are programs that really work well at engaging low-income students and their parents. Their future is in education, and the more we can help them see their future and grab onto their future, the better. The career technical education I talked about earlier, that is exciting students. They're not dropping out. They're not getting into drugs and gangs and trouble. They're finishing their work because they have a dream of who they will be, and they're working hard to get to that dream.
Thank you. Our next question. California is working to put in place a new and dramatically different assessment system. The legislature has asked that the superintendent submit recommendations regarding what the state's testing system ought to look like going forward. What do you believe is the primary purpose of a state assessment system, and how should such a system be designed? What should be its major components? Start with Mr. Torlakson.
Well, this is a huge challenge, but an appropriate challenge to re-examine how we're judging schools. What are the targets we're setting that define success in our schools? And so we have moved forward with the new Smarter Balance Assessment. 3.2 million students were given the chance to take that field test and test it out. We want to see beyond just scores in English language arts and math, what are the other targets we should be setting for schools to define success? If a school is really good at keeping students that are on the edge of dropping out, their test scores will probably go down because they're retaining a number of students. For a while they may go down and then they'll come back up. But we need to look at a comprehensive system that also includes career readiness, also includes college readiness. Do you offer a full set of AP courses, for instance, for our students? So we are in the process of actually defining that. We have a working group of policy leaders in higher education, in K-12, of parents and teachers working together to define what this new accountability system should be like. And I think we're headed in the right direction in that regard.
Thank you. Mr. Tuck.
You asked first about the point of the accountability system, and to me there's two key points there. First is getting information in the hands of parents and community members so they can know truly how are their schools doing and are they effectively educating their kids. That's why it's so important to have real data on how a school is doing. Because when parents know what's going on in school, then they're going to force the change and be a part of the change that's necessary for kids. Secondly, it's about getting teachers and principals the information they need to know, how are my students actually doing compared to other students, so we can get better at improving our instructional program. Without information on how your child or how your student is doing, how do you change your instructional program to help support them? So we've got to get moving fast. And to me, there's a real concern right now where our state has put the accountability program on the burner, and it's not really accountability, it's about getting data to improve student achievement. And I think we need to move very, very quickly towards getting something back in place so we can get information in the hands of parents and educators so we can best serve kids.
Thank you. Our next question comes from a member of our audience. Please share your thoughts on the Central American children who are crossing our borders. Start with Mr. Tuck.
Working in schools, the way I always think about it is kids come to school, we have to serve them. That's our job. I think there's some larger policy conversations around that really the federal government has to dig into and the state government. But as educators, you come to our school, we're going to care about you, we're going to believe in you, we're going to love you, and we're going to do whatever we can to educate you. And I think you're seeing some good pieces of work right now where in LA there's an intake center for those kids coming in where we're trying to get the best information we can, place them in schools as fast as possible. I do believe the federal government should be allocating additional financial dollars right now to California to deal with this issue because it's such a big burden on schools. It requires more teachers. It requires particularly more counselors given the issues and challenges kids are coming in with. So I think that there needs to be the governor, the state superintendent, we need to push forward and actually get additional emergency funding for this situation. But at the school level, we got to do whatever we can to educate these young people and then obviously work with the federal government and to make sure that we can get our hands around the broader issue.
Thank you. Mr. Torlakson.
Well, this is a humanitarian crisis. These students are here from a chaotic background, a dangerous background. And when they come into the school, like our job is for all students, we must support them. We must give them an education. We must care for them and look at their total needs of the entire child. And yes, we need to go after federal dollars to reimburse us, but the cost should be something that we bear as part of our responsibility. As educators, we open our doors to have our students discover themselves, strengthen their talents, and believe in themselves and move forward in life and contribute to our economy. So that is the belief, similar to my opponent, to Marshall, that we need to take that approach. We take all kids and we help them learn.
Thank you. Our next question was submitted via email. What is being done to prepare special needs children for Common Core? Mr. Torlakson.
There's a number of assessments that are being looked at in terms of helping judge how best to measure their success, and workshops, professional development of special needs students, teachers, to help them in that regard. This is a very challenging opportunity, but I think it can also be one where it engages our special needs students in new and more exciting ways to more success.
Thank you. Mr. Tuck.
I think the key starting point has to be with our special education professionals and also with our non-special education professionals, because as you're seeing more and more schools moving towards inclusion and really some different exciting models for supporting special ed kids, we got to provide additional training for traditional special ed teachers and for your general education teachers, and really start to integrate it a lot more. Common Core, whether you're special education, whether you're foster, whether you're just high poverty or high income, is a big transition for our kids, and it's a big transition for our educators. And I think that our state really has not done a good job of implementing over a long period of time of recognizing this is a 3 to 4, 5-year transition that requires real funding for additional professional development for teachers, that requires real communication with parents. And there's a lot of frustration around this issue that really needs to be addressed and needs to be focused on, because we haven't implemented it very well as a state. And there's no question that our special education students, like all students, deserve us to make this transition as well as possible, and we got a lot of work to do to get there.
Thank you. We have another question that was submitted via email. What has happened to our adult schools, and where do you think they belong? Districts or community colleges? Mr. Tuck.
So I think this is a good example of when we talk about local control, what we actually mean. I believe strongly that school districts are the ones making the decisions for what makes the most sense for their adult schools rather than at the state level. And I think there's a huge need and a huge value for it, but I really believe strongly that the local superintendents, that the local school boards are the ones that should be driving these decisions. And once again, I think you put as much funding as possible into their hands, as much flexibility around those decisions, and let that be made at a very local level. And I think what you see is some really high quality adult education programs in some cases, and in other cases, some school districts may not be prioritizing as much, given they're making other decisions with their financial resources. But I just think that this has got to be, again, not business as usual in Sacramento. Let's give as much flexibility as possible on adult education, and let the local districts be the ones really kind of identifying what makes the most sense for their school communities, and again, as always, for their kids.
Thank you. Mr. Torlakson.
Well, adult education is an extremely important program. It has been subject to local control, and districts have had to make tough decisions. They've had to prioritize, and there was the challenge of how do we keep as many students, keep class sizes as small as possible, have as many teachers in the K-12 system supported and continued during the Great Recession. And as the budgets are built back, school districts are going to need again to focus on the role of adult education. The legislature and the governor asked me to appoint a task force that is looking with the community colleges and with the K-12 system how adult education should be handled in the future going forward. What are the best practices? Are there collaborative efforts that can be made between community colleges and school districts that are providing adult ed and the community colleges that are providing some basic education services? So I think this is positive to take a look at it, but it's a local decision, and under the local control funding formula again, it's one where local school districts can reinvest with the billions and billions of new dollars they have in adult education. It's really an important driver for workforce preparation and helping our parents and new immigrants succeed in our economy.
Thank you. We have another audience-submitted question. As California is moving forward in implementing the Common Core state standards to prepare students for college and career, we know that as students leave high school, they'll be living in a democratic society. What ideas or plans do you have to prepare students for civic life? And we'll start with Mr. Torlakson.
Well, thank you. This is very important. I was a science teacher, but I also a civics and social studies teacher, and a lot of our students don't understand the fundamental operation of our democracy and our different branches of government. And so I took it upon myself, working with our Chief Justice in California, to create a working group that has come out with a report on how to bring back a civics education into our schools. It's extremely important. Our students are the future voters. Our students are the future consumers. And how does our government system work? At the community college level, I've taught a course on how do we work with our different government structures to get results, to make change in the world that's positive. And a lot of the students that I have in the first few weeks, they show me that they don't know what the county does versus a regional government versus the city versus the school district. And it's very important to give them that information so they can be empowered to make change in their neighborhood, in their region, in the state. I find that those students, when they get going and have this opportunity, they're excited about it and they pursue it.
Thank you. Mr. Tuck.
I think civics, you take kind of this issue, and it's another example of why we need fundamental change in our schools, because we're just not adjusting and changing our curriculum at the pace we need to. Like, think about this. The vast majority of schools that still offer civics, they offer it at the high school level, at the senior and high school level. So literally a month, 2 months, 3 months before a person can actually vote is when they're first getting civics. It just doesn't make sense, right? We should be integrating this deeply into our social science courses, elementary, middle, and high school at a much earlier level. And these are the kind of things that just haven't changed with our curriculum in the state fast enough because, frankly, of just, I think, a lot of crippling regulation. Another one's foreign language. We still require foreign language at age 15, 16, and 17, even though we know kids learn it much faster at age 5, 6, and 7. And these are things that have not changed for decades. So we need fundamental change in our schools on all fronts. I really do believe that so much of it starts with giving as much flexibility as possible locally and then finding those wonderful examples of great work that's going on. Where's that wonderful civics teacher? Where's that classroom that's really integrated at the early level? And how do you share that and push that as fast as possible? That's the stage.
Thank you. This is our final question, and it does come from the audience. I'm a classroom teacher, parent, and tax-paying voter. As a union member, my union often did not represent what parents want or what children need. As a parent, I joined PTA to have a parent voice, but parents are not asked for their opinion on the position PTA takes on legislation. If elected, how will you ensure that the parents, the very people who entrust their kids to your schools, have a voice in public education? Mr. Tuck.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. You know, I'm a parent too, and you think about all I want is the school system to make decisions, thinking about kids first, my child first. And you think again about this Vergara case where there are policies that make it harder to ensure a quality teacher in every single classroom. And that's all a parent wants for their child, safety and really being embraced and believed in. And so we have to have a whole system that's focused on kids, which step one is how do we truly give parents a real voice? And in Sacramento right now, insiders are the ones making the policy decisions, not parents. And that has to shift. And the way we do that, I think it's a state superintendent's job to be working with the PTA, to be working with parent groups up and down the state, not to go to them after policy is passed, but to go to them ahead of time and say, what is the right policy? What are your opinions that we need to actually push in the legislature that make the most sense for your child? And let's actually once and for all have parent voice be the one that's driving the political decisions in Sacramento rather than the voices of the folks that fund political campaigns and the insiders that work up there. That's what has to change, real, true parent empowerment.
Thank you. Mr. Torlakson.
Well, again, the local control funding formula sets out a top priority to invest time and genuine outreach to get parents involved, and it needs to be real. Again, the Urban League Los Angeles, the PK, Californians Together, PTA, I think are good forums for parents. Fundamentally, though, we need to invest in our schools, provide opportunities for all of our students to thrive. It shouldn't be about blaming teachers. Teachers are the solution, not the problem. I believe too much teacher bashing is going on out there. I do believe that when students and their parents get engaged in the school, that they'll find welcoming teachers, caring teachers that will help their student move forward successfully in their school career and on in life.
Thank you. Sadly, our time for questions has expired. I say sadly because this has been absolutely fascinating to hear from both of you. It's now time for our closing statements, and each of you will have 2 minutes. The order of the closing statements will be in the opposite order from the opening statements, and so we'll start with Mr. Tuck.
Well, I want to again thank our co-sponsors for having this event, and thank you all for coming out on a Wednesday night to be a part of this. Today in public schools in California, 2.5 million kids went to public schools that cannot read and write at grade level. 2.5 million kids, 40% of the kids in our public school system. Think about that for a second. 2014, the most competitive economy in the history of mankind, low-skilled jobs pay only poverty wages, and 2.5 million kids can't read and write at grade level. We have a crisis in our state. We need fundamental change, and it starts with change in Sacramento. And there is no clearer example of that than this recent court case. Take a step back and think about this. Great state of California. Children are filing lawsuits against the state superintendent and against the state to get a high-quality education. Kids are filing lawsuits. What is going on around here? We have to change the way we think about this work, and it's got to be with one very simple test. Every single decision, what is best for kids? And that was the leading driver of the work that I did in Los Angeles when we opened new charter schools and turned around failing schools. What was best for kids? Great principals, teachers who we believed in and supported and who could make magic happen in classrooms because we know it's so possible, including parents. And when we did that, our kids soared. Think about this. Over 5 years, kids from Boyle Heights and Watts had the highest improvement in the state of California in math and reading. It's wonderful what's possible. And we got to get moving now. Because there are 6 million kids in our public schools in this state that do not get to vote in this election, and they currently do not have enough of a voice in Sacramento. Every major paper has endorsed our campaign, and there's a very simple, clear choice here. If you are comfortable with where California public schools are right now, then vote for the incumbent and vote for the status quo. But if you want real change, kid-first change, whatever it takes for kids, be a part of this campaign. Let's drive that change.
Thank you. Mr. Torlakson, your closing statement.
Well, thank you all. And California schools do have a long way to go, but we're making real progress. We must invest in our schools. We must invest in our schools. And when we do, we see great results. We've raised graduation rates to 80%, the highest ever in California history. 8th grade reading scores are improving faster in California than in any other state in the nation. So do we keep moving forward, or do we risk taking a huge step backwards? I say let's keep investing in every school, making classes smaller and academics stronger. Let's keep empowering schools to make decisions for themselves. Let's continue to make our schools safe. I've written laws that are helping prevent bullying and created 4,000 after-school programs in the state of California. We want our schools to be safe from bullying, drugs, gangs, and guns. We want to encourage our parents to be fully engaged in the education of their children. We need to keep working to make college affordable for all of our students. And we need to continue to expand career education so that every student is ready for college and the real world and has the skills to land a good job. And let's keep working so that every school has great teachers. That means quickly dismissing those who aren't up to the job. But it also means training and supporting the rest and recognizing the challenges they face, not blaming them or taking away their job protections. So here we are. I'm the only candidate in this race who has experience as a classroom teacher. I'm the only candidate in this race who has been a superintendent. Classroom teachers and educators across California are supporting me. Over 100 superintendents and key education leaders are supporting me. Mayor Eric Garcetti, Mayor Richard Reardon, and public safety officers throughout the California terrain are supporting me. I believe, they know that California schools are moving forward and that it is not the time to risk taking a turn backwards. Thank you. Appreciate all of us working together to improve the future of our students.
Thank you. Thank you to both of our candidates. And now we will have some closing comments from Linda Wah, President of the Los Angeles County School Trustees Association.
Good evening. On behalf of the Los Angeles County Schools Trustees Association, LACSTA, I'd like to thank all of you for coming, and thanks to the Los Angeles County Office of Education, the League of Women Voters of California Education Fund, and the California State PTA. I also want to thank Mr. Tom Torlakson and Mr. Marshall Tuck for sharing your vision of educational leadership and your insights into the challenges we face. This forum continues LACSTA's tradition of offering leadership and learning opportunities to our members representing school boards and community college districts in Los Angeles County. LACSTA encourages the public to support collective efforts to ensure the best education for our children by exercising their right to vote for the best candidate for the office of the Superintendent of Instruction. The future of California and the state's education system will be shaped by those elected on November 4th. So please vote and remind a family member or friend to vote. Thanks again to all of you for being here. It's because of people like you that I stand here this evening, or I guess I'm sitting here this evening, with a strong sense of optimism. And I'm optimistic because we have innovative leaders in education, engaged parents, and caring community members like you whose commitment to quality education will move us forward through the challenges facing education. Now let me turn this back to Janis.
Thank you. Thank you again to our candidates for taking part in this forum and for your desire to serve the people and especially the children of California as Superintendent of Public Instruction. California Channel will be regularly replaying tonight's forum until Election Day on November 4th. Please consult your cable listings for the California Channel. The webcast will be available for viewing until November 4th on calchannel.com, on the LA County Office of Education's website, lacoe.edu, as well as those of the League of Women Voters of California Education Fund and the California State PTA. Will you please, all of you, join me in thanking both of our candidates for appearing here tonight and for their willingness to serve. Thank you, everyone, and good night.